It helps us inform. Data helps inform the project scope, the maintenance cycle, documentation, and effectiveness of the program. A little bit into the technology side, we utilize photogrammetry, which is taking a bunch of aerial photographs, putting them together to create 2D and 3D data products. We also utilize spectral imaging as well as LiDAR data. So this is a little bit of the process that we go through to essentially allow us to deliver the data and the reports. Number one, we start with image capture. And so we fly over the evacuation routes within the right of way. We take the mapping and the spectral data and we go ahead and process that, which then allows us to identify and classify the hazardous vegetation along the evacuation route or fuel breaks. We then take that data, we go ahead and analyze it. And this is where we're analyzing volume, acreage, how much vegetation has grown back or how much vegetation has decreased. And then we go ahead and deliver this in a PDF report. We basically do this 3 times. So essentially we do this before an evacuation starts to deliver basically a route profile and analytics around an evacuation route to give staff the appropriate information they need to go ahead and make the decisions for that particular route. We do this before and after the project, so we can analyze the amount of vegetation that was removed in cubic yards, so volume and acreage. So the decrease of vegetation. So what was our impact? And then we go ahead and take this information a year after. We fly another route, or fly the same route again, and we go ahead and basically track how much vegetation has grown. And so we can go ahead and push resources to appropriate areas.
So the things that we look at when we do the flyovers, and this is an example of one of the report images that comes back to us, is the heights of the vegetation. We use 3 categories. High is your tree canopies. It's above 5 meters. Medium is your brush and shrubs. This is where a lot of your ornamentals fall. And then low is the grasses. That's the flashy fuels. So you can see on the image, the bright green is the high. So that's the tops of the trees. And then we have medium and low areas. And you can also see the kind of pale green is the public, like Google Maps, if you will. So that we're only collecting the data right above the evacuation route. So we're not up in the top of the picture. There's the edge of someone's house, so we don't have concerns about flying over things like that. We're just flying over the public right away. The other thing that we're able to track is invasive species and pathogens. Some of the UAS equipment that's used can tell the difference between the species based on their infrared signatures. So, and then the next thing we have coming up is the ability to look at vegetation moisture content. You can imagine the last 2 years, things are pretty wet, it's been fine, and now we have things drying out, a lot of flashy fuels. So we'll be able to do a better job at predicting what's going to dry out. And if you think about the winters before 2021, we had multiple years of drought in a row. Of course, it contributed to the CZU fire, which was right on our western edge there. So that's a new upcoming tracking statistic that we want to keep an eye on. This is an example of the advanced report, which is in advance of the project. So this is results of a before flyover. So we have the flight itself, and then we have the reports that come in. So the IHFR team uses this report to clarify the scope of work before it's sent out to Fire Safety Council, project managers, contractors that come in and do the work. It includes things like the slope, because you can only work on certain slopes and get in on certain slopes with the chipping materials and the hand crews from the contractors. We also identify the infrastructure for safety. So we're looking for utility lines, power poles, that kind of thing. Fire hydrants are important because we want to make sure we uncover them. They've got that 3-foot town ordinance that we want to make sure they're cleared for. And there's our vegetation profile again that we covered in the last slide. And these are the things that it impacts. It changes our field production day estimates. We're working really hard to narrow down accurate field production days. It affects the quotes and it affects the contractor participation. So if we estimate 8 days and it's only 4 days worth of work, they're not really crazy about that and they may not bid on our next one. So this ups our accuracy in predicting the production days. for all the contractors, traffic control, project staff, things like that. And those are the three, the last bullet point is the three things that you've heard me talk about before. Those are the three main things we look for in the before flyovers when we're adjusting the scope of work. So in this picture, you can see we've got a couple power poles, we've got some lines and wires. There's our vegetation heights again, so we know what we're going to be concentrating on if we have a lot of fasci fuels, if we have a lot of bushes that need to be chipped and taken out. And then the 50-foot buffer with the dark blue lines, that's the widest that we would go. The 50-foot buffer sometimes goes into people's front yards. So we always have about 10 to 15 feet as the public right-of-way in our permits, but we file our CEQA documents to go up to 50 feet if the residents want to sign an ROE and participate. So that's the widest that the project could be.
So this is one of our volumetric reports, and the way we do this is we do a before flyover and an after flyover. And the data products that we produce are 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional, so we can extract things like surface area as well as volume. And so on the right, we see a page from the report, and I believe this is the Arastadero report, where we're comparing November to December. And so this would be the impact of our project. And so in this case, we've seen 0.35% decrease in low vegetation, a 10% decrease in medium vegetation, and a 5% decrease in high vegetation. The baseline. And then the other thing, what's nice about these is once we have that snapshot in time, we can then go ahead and refer to that snapshot to see year after year how much vegetation has actually grown back.
Question for you. Can we interrupt, by the way, and ask questions a little bit? Sure. With the high vegetation, which are big trees, I mean, the work we're doing isn't really cutting the tops of the trees. Doesn't that tend to disguise work underneath it?
So with photogrammetry, we really only can measure what we can see. But when we start limbing up the sides of the trees, we're actually decreasing some of the volume and the surface area on top as well.
Okay.
So like I was saying before, we can take that snapshot in time and go ahead and compare this to a year later. And so with this report, we go ahead and do a flyover 1 year after the evacuation route was conducted, or the vegetation management project was conducted, and we can quantitatively show the metrics around how much vegetation has grown in that year. And so in this case, we have a 340% increase of low, 22% increase in medium, and 37% increase in high. And this allows us to really track the growth of these evacuation routes and also potentially help us do the project planning and implement resources where resources are needed.
I'll just chime in here. This is one of the things that you've heard about in the work plan. Can we go back again, Court? Yeah, it's okay. Sorry. In the work plan where we talk about using the best practices of a 2-year maintenance cycle, but we may need to adjust based on wet years. So we discovered here, like especially for Page Mill, we have a lot of regrowth, even though we just did it May of 2023. So the maintenance flyover documentation has been super important, and it'll directly impact how we start planning the maintenance cycles that we've presented a couple times, including in March when we came back from the district organizational meeting and showed you that graph where the overlap of the maintenance projects will eventually outpace the initial treatment projects. This is a key metric and report for that planning in our work plan. Okay, now next slide. Oh, I gave you some of this already. Yeah, so here's where, actually, this one's yours too.
Okay. So in this case, what we've done is we've broken down the vegetation by class to identify what increase, so what's going on and how do we compare that data from this year to last year. And so like we said, well, in this case, I think we're comparing June 2022 to May 2024. And we've broken down by vegetation class and be able to analyze and quantify how much vegetation has grown back by the particular class. Very color specific species.
Yeah. Oh, next slide.
And so I think this is kind of a telling example, and this is an example of burn preserve, where we use the goats for a fuel break. On the left is basically a handheld map that the district is given, saying where the goats are going to be and where the vegetation approximately is going to be eaten up by the goats. On the right is we've basically done a map of, or a mineral system map of the area. So on the top, you see RGB, which is your visual spectrum. And on the bottom, you have your spectral. And so with those two data sets, we can quantitatively measure and track the actual impact the goats have on creating this fuel break.
Like the lower part photos of the light brown areas feel safe.
Correct. So if you look at the photo on the right and the spectral photo, which is a green NDVI, what we're seeing is that brown towards the basically the brown is where the goats have treated. And so we can visually see and we can visually measure the actual impact that they have through the spectral imaging.
This helps us with ground truthing too. So we know the contractors' volume reported and the things that we're being invoiced for. We've got another way to document that biomass and that volume. Next slide.
And here's another telling example. So we're looking at as RGB, so visual imagery. On the left, you have burn preserve before. This was this year, 2024. And on the right, you have the after. And just from the visual images, so that we're not extracting volume, we're not talking about area, we can just visually see what sort of impact the goats have had on burn preserve.
Okay, next slide.
Ooh, this is one of my new favorite topics. So what we're looking at here is a LiDAR cross-section. And LiDAR, we've probably seen this on autonomous cars. They're also on unmanned aerial systems. LiDAR is a light detection and ranging, so a very accurate laser scanner. And one of the benefits of using LiDAR is being able to penetrate the tree canopy, unlike what we do with photogrammetry, and be able to see the ladder fuels or the ground. And what we're seeing here is a cross section. So if we drew basically a line across a 3D model, we're looking at it from the side. This is actually my girlfriend's father's house. So on the top, you have a structure, and then we can see the trees next to the structure, and the trees have been limbed up, park-like treatment. And then if we move over to the right, we see how dense the ladder fuels are. And so it's not a new technology, but it is getting cheaper and a little bit easier to use. And so this is one of the technologies that we do utilize.
Great. And the last slide, please. So this should look a little familiar. These are the things that are coming up in the future, as well as a summary of what we're using the technology for. And you can see the increase in the amount of activity with our before, after, and the maintenance flyovers actually aren't on here. So we've gone up to 6 evacuation route projects for 2024, and the circles represent the before and after flights. So we're getting a lot of data, and we're also getting starting to get overlap and the other types of things that help us keep it all together. And then every one of these will appear next year as a maintenance flyover as we introduce next year, 2025, 3 or 4 initial treatments, as well as our maintenance treatments. The other wonderful things that happen are Jackson develops algorithms for the specificity just for the district. So in the 2 years that he and I have been working together to narrow this down, he's actually been building what it measures in the background. So I've picked out the species, the invasive species that I want to know are coming back to our routes. We've picked out the types of things that are being introduced, like the shot hole borer beetle just came to this county earlier this year. So we can track those types of things now based on the learning that's gone back and forth between what I need, what the district needs, and what Jackson's been able to create specifically for us. And then finally, the ground truthing has been very important. It helps us. It's a two-way street. We get to verify what the contractors are telling us, and they get to verify what Jackson's algorithms are measuring for us. So that's been excellent for the program. And we're also creating a database. We're now in our 3rd year of these projects. So we know what's been happening. We know what's been growing back. We know which levels of fuels are growing back. And we know we're starting to shift towards higher percentages in the canopy. So if you think about the vegetation we do want to retain, we want to retain the canopy. That's that shaded fuel break effect that we're going for. So this helps us show what we're doing and that we're doing it right, and also find out what is getting, down there and growing back as we change the sunlight that hits the ground and things like that. So, exciting summary of what we have been doing and what's coming up.
Thank you. Any comments, questions?
It's just impressive that, how you're using technology to solve all these issues and how targeted all of this is.
There was a question. This seems very innovative. Is anyone else doing this in this area, or how unique are we in taking this approach to measurement and analysis?
Yeah.
Well, Jackson and I and the IHFR team, we get to be the dream team. So there's people who come and asked us, MidPen and actually County Fire and other folks who have asked about how we do and what we're doing. Drones are fairly new with some of this measurement, but the principles of what we're measuring and what we're looking for in the ground truthing we're doing, that's across a lot of agencies that do this. Mm-hmm. The thing that stands out about this is, so the county, we buy services from the county for their LiDAR. You may have, I think we just approved it at the last meeting, the renewal of that. They fly their LiDAR every 3 years. We're flying it every project so that we can get to those ladder fuels and those flashy fuels. CAL FIRE measures vegetation moisture. They measure in the month from like October to March. We're going to be able to look at that every time we fly over so that we can keep track of what our potentials are and what's coming up. So a lot of it has to do with our frequency and our specificity in terms of, the district being able to have this resource.
And one other question for Jackson, how automated is the analysis software? How much time do you have to spend with the data? Is it programmatic? Is it manual?
It's about 80-20. So the algorithms get us about 80 to 90% of the way there. And then there's a human in the loop, which goes ahead and corrects some of the data to make sure that our numbers are accurate.
Okay, great. Any questions or comments?
Well, I was really looking forward to this presentation. The fact that you had the ground penetration, you had the what you said also about, I guess, moisture content measurement in the future. I just see so much potential for this and to automate and track in real time. I see it's so powerful. So you did not disappoint.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments here? Any public comments on this?
There is. I just wanted to, for the record, state, because I missed it during roll call, that we do have representatives from Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council here. Seth Chalet, Amanda Brenner Cannon, and Saeed Ortiz. And Amanda left a comment that says this is great. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Going back to how specific. So, there are a lot of organizations that do mapping of this nature, but nothing to the fine scale that we're achieving. Okay. So each evacuation route probably generates a terabyte worth of data, vegetation data. And so, you can do some similar things with satellite and manned aircraft. But when it comes to really kind of getting the fine detail around the vegetation volume, is we do need the unmanned aerial systems and the sensors that come along with that. So,
great. Thank you very much. Very interesting stuff.
I'd like to make a comment if I could.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Yes. Yeah, I'm just very excited, and I'm pleased to see that the commission is similarly excited by the presentation and just the notable and remarkableness of it. And I will say that as a fire district, our mission and our statement is to keep bad things from happening. And so in doing, sometimes I think we can go overboard in removing vegetation, removing brush, and this is a wonderful way of making sure that the earth is preserved. We understand our ecosystems, and we are able to scientifically apply not only fire science, but also environmental protection and environmental science. And I think that's a very important, strong value that this district brings to the community and to other partner agencies that are visualizing it and visiting our endeavors. So I just applaud Jackson and Eugenia and the whole team for being so enlightened to do this. And thank you for doing that for us.